Hello and welcome to the Tryst. India's freedom struggle was unique. It transformed an anti colonial anger into a democratic and inclusive nationalism. After independence, it fell upon Jawaharlal Nehru to give that spirit an institutional form, to build a modern, secular, and inclusive nation that drew strength from its civilizational roots. And in doing so, he succeeded where a few expected him to. It is precisely because of this success that Nehru becomes so inconvenient for the Hindu right today. Because the India he built was founded on pluralist conception, it emphasized on multiculturalism and rooted in democratic values. It stands in direct contrast with how the nation has been envisaged by the right today. To commemorate the birth anniversary of Pandit Nehru, we have been joined by Professor Sandeep Dikshit, a former member of the parliament who will help us untangle the myths around Nehru and reclaim the real Nehru from the fog of propaganda. I welcome you, sir, to the discussion.
Thank you.
So, the first claim, or more like a myth around Nehru, is that Nehru divided India to secure his own claim to power. बीजेपी और आरएसएस लीडर्स जैसे अमित मालविया, संबित पात्रा, इन लोगों का ये कहना है कि नेहरू ने पार्टीशन इसलिए माना क्योंकि उनको अपनी कुर्सी चाहिए थी. So my question is, does this reinterpretation of partition as one orchestrated by Nehru or one where Nehru is responsible as his bid for power stand up to historical scrutiny?
Interesting. We have not been able to, downplay Pandit Nehru. He was our first prime minister, and normally in a mature democracy in which politics and the nation, goes from one progressive state to another, you look at the past to understand what's happening today, but you don't use it to politically constantly build up, your rather damage today. The problem with the BJP and the prime minister, the extreme right, and I must say, in the beginning, the socialists and the left, who while today think of Nehru more positively, were actually the first people who started this whole myth building against Mr. Nehru. Their problem is that they are not able to get out of this fixation with this absolutely outstanding person. And I think that is a very sad part. And I don't think it's really on our generation or anybody to defend Nehru. I don't think Nehru needs any defense. Yet, because in popular discourse, this kind of filth and nonsense is going around, I will try, and say a few things. I think the whole issue of partition needs to be spoken of at much greater length. Because, it's only when you understand what happens in the almost preceding 60 to 70, especially in the preceding 7 to 8 or 10 years, from about the 1930s to the middle of the 1940s, you'll not be able to understand what was happening. Now, by the time we come to 45 and 46, right? The 46 elections that happened, and representative assemblies were being made because of Muslim League's absolutely vicious communal campaign, because the fact that Nehru had constantly been speaking of a egalitarian socialist society where land reforms would be one of his principal things, which had scared off most of the Muslim landed elite. And please remember, it's the landed and the educated only who are voting. About 8 to 10% people used to have the electoral vote, not everybody. So Muslims and Muslim leaders, especially in certain parts of northern India, where the permanent settlement and zamidaris were much higher than in other areas, they suddenly started thinking that when independence comes, and at that time it was looking almost possible that independence is coming. Okay, they were very, very clear that if Nehru remains at the helm, or if Congress is there unbridled, their traditional rights of looting the peasantry, as has happened in Pakistan subsequent to that, because no reforms took place there, which is why Pakistan, while initially progressing well, has become such a disastrous state. They thought that, they either need a counterpoise to the Congress to keep people like Nehru in check, or express a sort of animosity or anger to him and voted. It was after the 46 elections when Muslim League won some substantial amount of seats. The British, because they were always very, very unhappy with the Congress, especially because of our opposition to us joining the World War II, are constantly saying that you promise us independence, only then we will enter this so-called fascist struggle of yours, because for us, imperialism and fascism are both evils, right? they in any case were very anti-Nehru and Congress, and had constantly been pushing Muslim League. I mean, even when Muslim League just had about a minimal presence, they would always put Muslim League on a pedestal with the Congress, trying to say that Congress is a Hindu party while Muslim League is a Muslim party. In this context, when it comes to 1946, because of the electoral results and the constant baying by the Muslim League that we need a partition, the Congress and our leaders constantly started talking and working for a united India. It's very, very clear. All documents show that, all efforts show that. In fact, it is in 1946 when the combined governments are formed and Mr. Nehru takes over as the vice chairman of the cabinet or the Viceroy's Council to run the government and basically take us towards independence. The experience of working with the Muslim League was very horrific. See, the Muslim League ministers tried to, disable working of the Congress under any circumstances. A budget that was brought in by the Muslim League finance minister, who later on became the Prime Minister of Pakistan, was disastrous. And it is Sardar Patel who by the end of 1946 starts realizing that what has happened or what is happening with regard to the relations with Muslim League are completely untenable. And in a new India, which is going to come in about 6-8 months or a year or 2 years' time, this partnership will not be possible. Prior to that was the Direct Action Day, which had communalized people, and while popular, pathetic films show it to be a one-sided thing, it was actually a two-sided battle in which first Hindus get killed, then Muslims get killed and all that. It had vitiated the atmosphere, almost leading Gandhiji to say towards the middle of 1947 that, the people are not responding anymore to a united India. And I don't think anybody could read India as well as he did. So in these circumstances, it is actually in December or January of 1946-47 that Sardar Patel is roughly the first person who starts thinking that partition is probably the only way forward. His documenters of his most brilliant and authentic biographies at that point of time, V.P. Menon, S. Shankar, who are also supposed to be very close to him, and nobody can put a question mark to them that they were biased about Patel, start saying that they were thinking of the same, and so was Sardar Patel. Nehru was clearly very, very opposed to that. Okay, I'll just mention you the issue of the cabinet mission, which is often taken to be putting a question mark on Nehru's and others' decisions. I'll come to that. But this partnership between Patel and Nehru was always very, very strong. They had a lot of differences, but on certain critical and crucial grounds, most of them listened to each other. Just as if we ever discuss the issue of Kashmir with you, I will show you how Patel completely was against Jammu and Kashmir coming to India. And it's actually Nehru who convinces him that, no, we must look at Jammu and Kashmir as a possible, component of India and not let it go to Pakistan. Similarly, Patel first starts discussing the idea that a partition may not be such a bad idea with Nehru. Nehru initially did not respond to that, then starts coming towards Patel's point of view because, Patel was a powerful voice in the Congress. And it is Patel who then says that I will convince Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, another incredible biography of Sardar Patel written by Rajmohan Gandhi, the great grandson of Nehruji, and a fantastic biography. And he's really a Patelian in terms of his support. He also kind of states the same thing and says it is Sardar Patel who convinces Gandhi. So this is how the Congress's high command or leadership started thinking that partition has to be probably the only option forward. Then the British come up with something called the cabinet mission. Right, and this is very often quoted by the BJP and all to say that it is because of that Nehru and others, if they had agreed to the cabinet mission, perhaps partition would not have taken place. But because Nehru was hungry to become the prime minister, he allowed that to happen. Okay. So let me just explain. The cabinet mission was initially, was it a sincere attempt? I don't know, but initially a hard-working attempt in trying to work out a solution which could be agreeable to both the Congress and the Muslim League. Right. By that time, the third group, supposedly communal group, which was the Akalis, were quite in with the Congress, and basically the Congress and the Akali Dal on one side and the Muslim League on the other. And Britain, for all its so-called announced fairness, was frankly speaking really aligning with the Muslim League. Okay. Now, what the cabinet mission says is that they will divide India into three broad administrative categories: category A states, B states, and C states. And pardon me, if my memory fails and I'm not able to tell you the exact, what each of them stood for, but one of those categories was for what they called Hindu states, or the broad central Indian states. One category would stand for the Western states, the Muslim states in the Western India. And the third category for the Muslim dominated states in Eastern India. Each three would form three separate administrative blocks within a broader India. Okay, they would each have their own, work on their own constitution and then have a common constitution. And also, after 10 years, they could decide if they want to remain in the union or not. And the princely states were not included in this broader formulation. So, it would have been a completely unstable nation, because these three groups, in any case, these were the three groupings that Muslim League wanted. And Adrija, you can understand what's happening today in India. I mean, if this kind of arrangement would have worked out, my personal feeling is that India would probably have balkanized into far many more states than it otherwise did. And I think it's a complete nonsense by hairy-brained people to think that the cabinet acceptance of the cabinet mission could have either delayed a partition or perhaps led to a united nation. I think that is crap. Sorry, I don't want to use strong words. And in history, one should never predict something that you don't know happened or not. But my gut feeling is, going by the experience and the various fissiparous tendencies in post-colonial India for almost 30 to 40 years, some of which still continues, that I don't think that could have united the nation. In fact, it would have led us to a mess. The highly progressive, egalitarian, and outstandingly pro-poor policies that Nehru followed in India and really brought us to a place where we could become the kind of nation we are today. All of that could not have been followed. So I think in wisdom, the Congress accepted parts of that, rejected parts of that. And when finally the whole thing came down to the question of the constitution, we rejected the cabinet plan, which is often quoted as the final nail in the partition. True enough. But I think the alternate at this point of time was far more horrific. The nation that could have been kept together for 10 or 15 years may have perhaps become a completely unmanageable, perhaps violent, a nation that started hating each other, and the nation which is on broad principles of three completely separated geographical, administrative, politically, ideological units, only under a common army and a common foreign policy. That in independent India, I don't think that can happen. So, but I would say, Adrija, this actually needs far more detailed understanding than what I'm saying. I'm only looking at very, very peripheral points of view. There are many, many more details. There is how the Americans were working, how the unions were working, how communal groups were being promoted, where India was coming at this point of time. I think it's a fascinating story. It's a tragic story, but it's a story in the context of Nehru, Gandhi, Patel, and the other Congress leaders, and the Akalis and the Muslim League, to be understood in far more greater detail, I think, by every right-thinking Indian.
So, the second claim around Nehru is that Nehru became the prime minister despite winning fewer seats. So, right का मानना ये है कि कांग्रेस के ज्यादातर लीडर्स पटेल के फेवर में थे. तब गांधी जी के इंटरवेंशन के वजह से Nehru prime minister ban पाए. So the entire process was very undemocratic according to the right today. So how do you respond to this, sir?
Let me give you a bit of a background to this. Normally, what would happen in the Indian National Congress is that Indian National Congress had a coterie of very senior leaders, of which Sardar Patel, Rajgopalachari, and many of these people's Dr. Rajendra Prasad were members, and broadly before every AICC session they would come to a broad consensus as to who the next Congress president would be. Then that name would be put in front of the AICC session where the person would be voted in. And of course there were some issues in which an election also took place, the most famous being in the one in second time when Subhash Chandra Bose wins against the wishes of the day. So but in 1946, you see, because 1942 was the last time elections had happened and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad was the president of the Congress. Now in 42, because of the Quit India movement, all the Congress leaders get arrested. So till 45, almost all the top 1,000, 2,000 Congress leaders are behind bars. The Quit India movement is being run by the local level leaders and the workers. And in 45, 46, when they are all released, it is then decided that we now need a new president. So when the 45 presidentship comes in, as I said, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad had been the Congress president for the past 6 years. He was elected in 1942. Okay, and elections couldn't take place because all the Congress leaders were in jail after the Quit India movement. So Maulana Azad was at that time keen to become Congress president again. And please remember, this was the election for the post of the president of the All India Congress Committee, the president of the Indian National Congress, right? Not the prime minister. Some people say that it was inevitable that the president would also be the prime minister. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, there is no correlation between the two. Let's keep that point in mind very, very clearly, okay? Because elections to the national assemblies had just been held, okay? And Congress had a majority there. So Congress was electing the president of the All India Congress Committee, the AICC, who is not necessarily the person to head the government. Okay, one point there. So what happened is, and this I will also quote, one of the greatest supporters of Sardar Patel, a very, very prominent Congress leader, Dwarka Prasad Mishra, DP Mishra, who later on became Chief Minister of the Central Provinces and Madhya Pradesh, also father of Mr. Brijesh Mishra, who was, a very, very close and national security advisor to Vajpayee ji. So, DP Mishra's credentials are from both sides. And DP Mishra was never a great supporter of Pandit Nehru. In fact, he was among the gang which, even while Pandit Nehru was prime minister, used to oppose him. See, between the two leaders, Nehru was the popular leader. He used to be the people amongst the masses. And Sardar Sahab was the one who used to constantly organize the Quit India Movement organization, the civil disobedience, organizing the Congress working committees and Congress committees in various states was something Sardar Sahab used to do. No doubt about the fact that he was a great organizer. Okay, but the leader was Nehru. And how do I prove that or show that point? I'll come to a little later. So it was decided by many people that, also Sardar Sahab was getting on in years. And these words are mentioned by many of his contemporaries. It was decided that let's give him a chance. Okay. Now, because a full session of the AICC could not be called, and in the Congress, the tradition is that it is members of the All India Congress Committee who elect the president. Let's remember that. PCC presidents and others don't really have that power to elect the Congress president. So it was decided that rather than calling a session, we will ask the various Pradeshik Congress committees, which were our regional Congress committees or our provincial Congress committees, at that time they were known as, to send in their suggestions for the presidentship of the party. Okay. Now, suggestions were there, these 10 or 11, and as DP Mishra says in his autobiography, and if you want, I will send you the relevant pages. You can show them on your podcast to people. He says that, look, when this thing came, okay, I'm not exactly quoting his words, we always knew that at the dawn of independence, it is Nehru who will lead independent India. This is the first line. But to most of us in CP and Barar and elsewhere, it was thought that the ailing Sardar should be given the honor of being the next president of the Congress committee. Okay, while at that time and again repeats, while at that time we knew that when it comes to the premiership of independent India, Gandhi and others, we will choose Nehru. So he was also very clear that he was electing not the next premier or prime minister, but he was electing the next president. Now, therefore, you have to understand the spirit in which Sardar Sahab was elected as the president of the Indian National Congress. So when this proposal comes, right, in that very meeting, Gandhiji says that no, because Gandhiji thought no, it's also a time, please remember, the president of the Indian National Congress would then also be negotiating with the British and the other stakeholders in the partition agreements, which is the Muslim League and the Akalis and others. And Gandhi also made this point that he also realized that Nehru will be more adept at these negotiations. So that is why he was chosen. And that is why Gandhi said no. And please remember, this has happened even earlier. It is not that this is the first time that Gandhiji or other people's will was imposed to select a particular leader. Subhash Chandra Bose, for example, when he gets elected as the Congress president for the first time, many people are opposing him, including Sardar Patel. How is it that this example is never quoted by the BJP? Because it doesn't suit them. For them, they have to castigate and put Nehru as a villain. Of course, there are many reasons. I mean, Gandhi 10 to 15 years ago had said that it is not Sardar, it is not Rajaji, but it is Nehru who will be my successor. And please remember, whether people like it or not, Gandhi was India's most popular leader and most powerful leader. And everybody knows that after Gandhi, the most popular leader was Nehru. And remember, popular leaders become prime ministers. Leaders whom people like, not people who organizations like. Sardar Patel was a tremendously great leader, no doubt on that. Would he have also been a great prime minister? Absolutely. So was Nehru, an outstanding prime minister, because these people came out of the metal and the fire of the Indian national movement. And whether BJP likes or not, they believed in the broad Congress ideology of a socialist democratic nation, of equity, of equality, of sisterhood and brotherhood of all people, of a solidly secular state, of a state that stands for its people and not for capitalists, just to put in a point in the end, okay? So whether it was Pandit Nehru or it was Sardar Patel, policies would not have been substantially different. So I'm sorry, but BJP would not like what I said. And perhaps the ban on the RSS which Sardar Saab put as a home minister, if he had put as a prime minister, he would never have taken it back.
Okay, so my third myth or the claim around Nehru is a very strange one, is that Nehru is being portrayed as someone very elite, that he used to send his laundry to Paris. So BJP and RSS supporters and sympathizers have quoted this quite a lot of time, that Nehru as someone who is very entitled, westernized and elitist, and one who is very disconnected from the realities of India. My question is very simple, that what purpose does this serve by stating this anecdotes in shaping the public perception of Nehru today?
See, I think it's basically done to malign him, because there's very little. See, the fact that we hide all his great achievements, and here, Adrija, I would say I also blame the Congress. I very often hear people when they praise Nehru say that he brought in IITs and IIMs. I think IITs and IIMs are one of his most minor contributions. They try and become defensive about his growth rates. I will prove to you. I think you should give me an opportunity to show how stupendously well his governments did in the economic front. Everybody keeps quiet when somebody says he never paid attention to agriculture. Absolute nonsense. A lot of people say that he compromised on education. To some extent, fair enough, because there were lots of priorities, but there were great achievements in education. The outstanding work done on infrastructure, you will be, you'll be amazed to hear when I'll give you the numbers to see what we did in infrastructure. What did we do in terms of health? I mean, so let's forget that. So because nobody wants to get into those serious debates, unfortunately, including those who call themselves Nehruvians or his supporters, people have done these little things to nitpick on a person. And, it's an old habit. Gossip. People love gossip. His whole story is that, he was a great woman's man. All that nonsense is taken out. So this is part of that. Let's remember, obviously, he came from an elite family. His father was very, very well off. He came through a Western education. And he admits to that. The great thing about Nehru, unlike the people of today, is not a hypocrite one bit. And he says that. And that is why when he says that when he came to India, he went on to discover India. He did that. He looked at the India that he did not know. Most of you don't know. Most of us who are urban born, 99% of the people in the BJP, even if they belong to Mufassils, have absolutely no idea. I think if you just read the discovery of India, you'll find out that he understood India far more than 99% of the so-called Indians that we live in today. So I think because of that, they started doing these little nitpickings, okay? But because he was also coming from a family like this, he's somebody who donates Swaraj Bhavan, donates 89% of his income to the nation, donates Anand Bhavan to the Congress, right? Obviously, his lifestyles and others were from a category of people who were fairly well off. Remember, these are the people who discard everything and become simple lives, who sacrifice all their, comforts and start living the lives the way Gandhiji designed congressmen to start living. So people forget that great sacrifice. Some people have done an excellent thing that in case his clothes would go to Paris, how much time would it take to go and get washed and come back? And in the amount that it would spend, you could probably be able to get a new suit switched or a new sherwani switched. So economically, in terms of time-wise, it's a crap argument. What happened is, and you'll almost laugh, in Allahabad, there was a shop called the Paris Laundry. Like you have laundry shops, okay? And I'll share the photograph with you. And his clothes used to also go there. So you combine this, this larger than life image of this, very, very rich man. And remember, it was a feudal country. Even today, we love our royalty, and we love these kind of stories about our leaders.
Sir, initially in your first response, you had mentioned about the Kashmir issue. So that's the last myth that I would want to address, is that Nehru's promise of a plebiscite in Kashmir created decades of instability. So this charge has been repeated again and again, that Nehru's decision to involve the UN and his bias towards Sheikh Abdullah lost control over Kashmir. They argue they argue that his so-called idealism and his misplaced faith over international opinion weakened India's strategic and created the Kashmir problem that continues even today.
So once the Pakistanis send the infiltrators into Kashmir, and the battle is happening with Kashmir. You see, after a period of time, first of all, I'll tell you how did the word plebiscite come about, okay? Now, what in the Partition of India plan, it was decided that obviously there will be a geographical division of Pakistan and India, okay, into what were called Muslim dominated and Hindu dominated areas. Within them, there will be no division. So just because Hyderabad is a Muslim dominated area, it won't go to Pakistan. Or just because there are cities in Pakistan, like say Lahore, part of Lahore, which is Hindu dominated, they will not come to India. So there'll be a neat, contiguous geographical division, except for East Pakistan and West Pakistan. Okay. But there was an issue that there are some states, especially the princely states, what do we do with them? When Attlee first announced the issue of the states, he in fact made a very mischievous announcement and said that the princes are allowed to decide whether they want to go to either of the two dominion states or remain independent. It is at this time that Nehru and the Congress create a hue and cry, and then it is modified to say that they have to decide about joining either of the dominions. Okay. Then the word was used that in case there is a conflict between the decision of the prince, okay, and the majority sentiment of the people reflected at that time by the census, numbering of whether it's a Muslim dominated or a Hindu dominated nation, the use of the plebiscite will be utilized. Okay, so plebiscite was the word being used then, and plebiscite was first never used in Kashmir. See, what had happened is the northwestern frontier provinces, which is Pakhtunkhwa, I think the name is, the part of Pakistan next to Afghanistan in the northwest, they had a Congress ministry. See, it's interesting. The Hindu Mahasabha had a ministry with the Muslim League in East Bengal. Okay, had a ministry with the Muslim League in Sindh and Baluchistan. There, the Hindu Mahasabha never prevents the Muslim League for voting for partition. Okay, whereas they put the entire blame on the Congress. Right? And in fact, it is in the states where the Hindu Mahasabha was part of the Muslim League, those states that vote overwhelmingly for partition. So the culpability of the Hindu Mahasabha and others, as I said, when we talk about partition, we'll discuss there. But for a moment, let's get back to Northwestern frontier. So because the vote of the assembly there therefore votes for coming to India, but it was geographically far away. So the British decided that we will have a plebiscite in the northwestern frontiers, and they voted to be with Pakistan. Similarly, Assam, which was part of the old Bengal province, and Assam was going off and those parts were being cut, there was a district of Sylhet, which was in Assam. So Sylhet was a Muslim majority area, and a plebiscite was held in Sylhet. And Sylhet also predominantly, a very, very high percentage voted to go with Pakistan. So plebiscite had already taken place. It's not that it had been offered to Kashmir, was the only state. Now Kashmir had been dilly-dallying thanks to the Maharaja and his desire, in fact even desire to be an independent state. They had been contemplating being in a state called Dogristan. right? Interestingly, the counterpart of the Hindu Mahasabha and the Jansangh now and the BJP now in Jammu, Kashmir and state had actually said that they would go with the Maharaja, whether he goes with Pakistan or with India. So they forget what their ancestors used to do in Jammu and Kashmir. Anyway, so this is the background, right? Now, see, Kashmir was also a situation like that. Yes, third place where we used plebiscite was Junagadh. The Nawab of Junagadh signed an instrument of accession to Pakistan. When Junagadh gets taken over by Indian forces, in spite of the fact that we get taken over by the Indian forces, it was the greatness of the government of India that we held a plebiscite in Junagadh, because it had become a controversial thing कि राजा कहीं जाना चाहता, प्रजा कहीं जाना चाहती है. And in a state that had 20% Muslims, 99% of the people voted for being in India, which means almost over 90% to 95% of even the Muslims there voted for India. And I think only 60 or 70 of the total voters actually voted to go with Pakistan, which really showed, how secular and how pro-Indian even the Muslims, of independent India at that point of time were. Now, so the other one thing that we keep offering to Pakistan all through this debacle is that let's have a plebiscite in Jammu and Kashmir. Look, the Maharaja was a Hindu who signs an instrument of accession. Undoubtedly, majority of the population is Muslim. At that time, even Jammu and Kashmir had a substantial Muslim population. And the reason why the Congress and the government was very, very confident that we will overwhelmingly win the plebiscite is because of Sheikh Abdullah. Sheikh Abdullah was by far the most popular leader of the valley. See, the Hindus would in any case vote for us. The Ladakhi Buddhists would vote for us. In many parts, the Muslims are voting for us. It was really the valley which was in consideration. The Mirpuri area, Uri and the Mirpur area, which is towards the west, was and we knew that we may or may not be, be able to use that. Okay. So, when this happens, it very keen that we do a plebiscite. Sheikh Abdullah had constantly promised us that, look, do a plebiscite, I will, because he wanted to come in India. In fact, that was one of the reasons we were very, very confident. Sheikh Abdullah was really a very, very popular leader. He had some problem with the Dogras and the others because he wanted land reforms. And just like the Muslim Jagidars voted for Muslim League against Nehru's idea of equality and land reforms, the Zamidars of Jammu and Kashmir were not very happy with Sheikh Abdullah. And Sheikh Abdullah and Nehru were very good friends. See, long time back when Sheikh Abdullah had started his party, he had called Jammu and Kashmir Muslim Congress. Then he has a long chat with Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And both are believers in the socialist broad ideology of the state owning the resources, state being pro-poor, not being exploitative, markets being controlled, having a sensitive government to public and people, especially the poor. He changes his party's name to the National Conference. In fact, Nehru secularizes the entire polity of Jammu and Kashmir. So Sheikh Abdullah was also very keen that let's have a plebiscite, and therefore we constantly kept talking to Pakistan about the plebiscite issue. Pakistan, I think, knew that in a plebiscite they will be beaten pants down. Okay. What also happens is that when the Pakistani invaders come into India, I think in Baramulla, the tribal invaders, undertake an orgy of violence and rape for 3 days, which spread like wildfire across the valley. So they were, whatever doubters there were that we will vote for Pakistan, were also at that time wanting to vote for India, because they didn't want to be with this cruel, inhuman new group of people called the Pakistanis. Mountbatten, over a period of time, starts telling the Indians that let's go to Jammu and Kashmir and take the Indian issue to Jammu and Kashmir. Okay, Patel was very opposed. Nehru was very opposed to that. Okay, initially not Sardar Sahab didn't say much, but Nehru was very, very clearly opposed to taking the issue to the United Nations. But what was happening is constantly this question keeps coming up. Okay, and I think the idea that started coming up, and this is reinforced by a lot of foreign officers, if you read them and hear what they were saying in media, is that if we had not taken the issue, Pakistan would have taken it. Because remember, the United Nations that comes up in 1945. Okay, United Nations is being seen by a lot of nations, especially the resurgent, independent new nations that otherwise did not have a voice in the world. You see, in the United Nations, for the first time, the poorest of nations would have the same voice as the richest of nations. Okay. On the United Nations floor, Papua New Guinea could speak with the same authority as China could, or USSR could, or any other nation could. Nepal would have the same voice as India, and India would have the same voice as America. So for us, it was important that the UN is treated as an important institution where world matters can be referred to. So India also had a positive outlook to the United Nations. Okay. Otherwise, we were lone voices in the world. While India had become independent, we were hardly a power. We were not a military power. We were not an economic power. Most of the world thought we were a basket case and perhaps wouldn't last for more than 4 years, 5 years. Some predicted India dissolving in 3 years. Some said 8 years. Some had 10 years. Most of the rest was skeptical for us. So to us, UN was an important institution. So when constantly Mountbatten insists on that, he brings Nehru to his terms. Okay, Sardar Patel at that time also was reluctant. Okay, because somehow Sardar Sahab thought we should not internationalize that issue. But I will tell you, later on in 1948, Sardar Sahab writes a letter to Mountbatten in which he says, and in spite of everything, they also had a very, very warm relationship. Okay, Sardar Sahab writes to to Mountbatten and says that today I understand the correctness of your advice given to us at that point of time. So later on, in spite of the fact that our experience with UN was not very good, Sardar Sahab also to some extent says that no, perhaps it was a wiser decision that we thought at that point of time. Sardar Sahab had valid grounds to say, because it's a position whether we go to the UN or not, whether we internationalize an issue or not. But I think the idea was that if we don't do it, then Pakistan does it. And please remember, most of us have fought cases. Whoever takes a particular conflict to a case, what they say, which becomes a part of the primary report, that is important. So when India referred to it, right, our words were taken there. And in that, we wanted Pakistan to be categorized as an infiltrator. So we went to there because if internationally Pakistan had been categorized or castigated as an infiltrator and the person who had done the wrong, we would have won a great diplomatic and moral victory. See, the other thing is, did taking it to United Nations really cost us? I don't know. And I don't see any reason why it costs us. Because what is it that the UN does? It does not send a force to intervene. Okay. By the time we come to the end of 1948 and the war that is happening, there are great books to show. The wonderful book by Chandrasekhar Dasgupta shows the British army officers, somehow convinced our prime minister and our cabinet that we can't continue the battle. While that may not have been a reality, but Srinath Raghavan and others who are great historians have shown that, we were also in two minds as to really take on this battle any further. Sardar Patel himself writes a very important letter which he says that our armies are very tired. I don't think we'll be able to last long in this battle in Kashmir. So the Indian side was also getting tired by the end of 1948, okay, or at least that's the feeling that the leadership was getting. So before the ceasefire, or when we go for the ceasefire and later on negotiations, what is it that India wanted? See, India knew that either we do a military solution, which may not necessarily lead to the kind of victory we may want, because you never know about battles. You win some, you lose some, you win some, you lose some. Okay, and even throughout 1947 and 48, we encroached upon the areas Pakistani infiltrators took us. They encroached upon some of us, and that battle was going on. So we wanted a plebiscite, and what the United Nations final thing is exactly what India wanted. See, initially what UN says is that both countries withdraw their forces, and plebiscite is held under UN auspices. India said this is not correct. You cannot equate Pakistan's infiltration with our army because it is acceded to India. Okay, so the agreement was that Pakistani forces will withdraw. All the infiltrators will withdraw from Indian Kashmir, which is our Kashmir. Pakistan will also withdraw its forces from POK, or Pakistani occupied Kashmir. What better for India? And then a plebiscite would be held. And what we said is that, look, we cannot withdraw our forces completely because we are suspicious of the Pakistanis. What if we withdraw forces and they send infiltrators again? So the United States agreed that a practical minimum force can be kept by India in the valley. So what more could we want? I think the UN final resolution is exactly what we wanted, and we wanted a plebiscite to be done quickly. By that time, Jinnah had realized that he would lose the plebiscite, and therefore he used the United Kingdom and other Western powers to continue this charade about not having a plebiscite. But however, as I said, I don't think going to the United Nations really cost us anything, okay? And suppose Pakistan had taken it, it would have ultimately led to the same thing. You think if Pakistan had referred the case, the Security Council would have looked at it differently to the way when India referred to it? I don't think so. I don't think it matters who takes it. Okay, so I think it's again a controversy. I mean, obviously there's a question mark. You may not have taken it. It's a decision, and I think it is a decision taken in the best interest of the nation at that point of time. I'd also like to express the fact that this is a day when I remember this absolutely outstanding man and thank him for having led India for 17 years and led our freedom struggle for 40 years. I think as an Indian, I must express my gratitude to our great leader.
Right, sir. All of us are in together. So this attempt, the vicious cycle of maligning him, its attempt to shrink him to a caricature actually says a lot less about him, but more about the times that we are living in. So in an age where narrative building, I feel it's so easy, it is based on misinformation, assumption, and some unverified claims. I think this discussion led by you was very important, and the legacy of the past and the history that we need to continue and come together is very important. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.